Good morning. How y'all doing? March 15th, 2003. My marriage was over. I walked into my house, furniture was gone, wife was gone, 2 little kids were gone. Walked into my little boy's room, started to cry. All I saw on the carpet were the 4 holes, the indentations from where his bunk bed used to be, and 1 little Lego. It was over. I got in my car, I started driving. Lived in Brandon, not too far away. I don't know if you've ever had a bad day where you just get in your car and drive, but it was probably the worst day of my life, and I was just trying to find another place to go. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you get in your car and try to change your venue, but it just doesn't help. Wherever you go, there you are, right? I mean, the problem is still there like a backpack. I was driving over the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. I don't know if you know much about the Skyway Bridge, but across the top of that Skyway Bridge, there are crisis intervention phones. And the thought of pulling my car off onto the shoulder and going over the rail was pretty strong. Call it divine intervention, call it whatever you want, but for some reason I did not park on the top of that bridge, and I went over the other side, remembering her last words to me as she left the state of Florida and moved my family to Seattle, Washington. She said, "I hate you, I hate Florida, and if you ever want to see these kids again, you're going to have to move to the Pacific Northwest," which to me was a death sentence. If y'all ever been there, it rains like 325 days out of the year. Like, I ain't going there. I'm a Florida cracker. It's not happening. I'm not sure how this all went down, but for some reason, she moved back. Now, by this point, I am remarried, new house. She said that she wanted the kids to be near me. So she moved into my old condominium, which is kind of weird. Got my ex-wife and my kids living in my old condo. Still has my furniture, like nothing's changed. And we lived like the kind of weird dysfunctional Brady Bunch for I don't know how long. I mean, she was coming over to our house for holidays. My wife and my ex-wife were going out to eat. I mean, any divorced remarried people in here, you're like, what? They were friends. I'm like, this is crazy. In November of 2007, November 28th, the mother of my children, who I was married to for 11 years, was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. It was in her liver, her lymph nodes, her kidneys, ultimately her brain and her lungs. She ignored the pain. It's like, it just hurts, whatever. And then when she was diagnosed, it was that far along. My kids at that point were old enough to Google and knew that the life expectancy of someone with that magnitude of the disease was likely going to be 5% of the people who have it are still alive 5 years later. So we had to sit down at their apartment and break the news to my 2 kids that Mom had cancer. They took it pretty well. We gave them a decision, a choice to make, because my ex-wife was going to move back to Seattle again for cancer treatment, live with her mom and dad. The kids could either stay with me or they could go with her. Now, my daughter had just started high school at this point, and she's like, there ain't no way I'm leaving again. I've moved back and forth across the country like 5 times. Forget it. So she moved in with my wife and I and my 3 stepkids. I get a call late at night from my son. He said, "Dad, Mom's got cancer. She's going to Grandma and Grandpa, live with Grandma and Grandpa for treatment, and I'm going to go with her." And I remember getting that phone call on November 28th, 2007. I took my phone and I folded it up, because it was a flip phone back then, and I let it go from the chair I was in all the way across the living room, spinning like a Frisbee. It hits the bottom of a marble table. Buttons flew everywhere. My phone, it was no comms anymore now, because I blew that thing up. And it was crazy because my wife was just coming out of our bedroom as I was releasing this Nolan Ryan caliber fastball, about 110, out of my hand, headed towards the table. And then I looked at her, I ran into the room, I grabbed my marital settlement agreement, which said there's no way she could leave the state with my children, and I got in my car and I took off with no phone. Now, this poor woman has no idea where I'm going. She knows I'm angry because my phone is currently in 4,000 pieces on the floor of the living room, and I ran in, grabbed some papers, and I bailed. I went to my friend's house, David. He's the guy that's always got my six, man. He is my best friend. He is the guy I can tell anything to, and I know he won't reproach me. He won't call me an idiot. He's there to support me. He's there to encourage me. He's there to hold me accountable when I need it. 11 o'clock at night, I'm banging on his door. He lets me in. I was trying to be all big and bad. As soon as he opens the door, you don't want to, I'm a guy. I don't want to be crying in front of, especially my friend. I don't want to cry in front of anybody. He opens the door and I break down like a 3-year-old little boy who just saw his mom after he skinned his knee. I got tears streaming down my face. He has no idea what's going wrong. He grabs me by the arm and he brings me into his house. He sits me down in a chair, throws a box of Kleenex at me and sets a bottle of water in front of me. And for over an hour, he just sat there while I cried. He didn't say a word. You know, as a man, a lot of times I just want to flex my brilliance and give you my counsel and tell you what I think you shoulda, coulda, woulda done. And I was amazed that this guy didn't say a word. And we made it through. And I remember the words that he said to me. He said, "You have got to let your son move to Seattle. Because if you don't let him go and she dies, he's never going to forgive you." Ladies and gentlemen, that was not what I wanted to hear, man. I went over there to get a wingman. We were going to go to court the next day, kick the door down, say, "This woman ain't leaving nothing. That kid stays with me. If she wants to go, she can go by herself." And now he's telling me what I don't want to hear. But you know what? He was right. 18 months to the day later, I got the call that they were going to pull the plug on her machines and I needed to get my daughter to Seattle. I flew her there in the middle of the night. Showed up, rented a car, swapped her out. She got out at the hospital. I picked my son up, and we went to McDonald's in West Seattle because he just needed to get away from the hospital. And I remember sitting across the table from him when my phone rang again. This time it was my ex-mother-in-law. She said, "We're going to turn the machines off now. You need to bring Jordan back." I looked at him. I said, "You ready to go back to the hospital?" He said, "Daddy, I came here to say, I already said everything I got to say to Mom." And I remember him saying, I don't want to go. I'm done. Can we just go back to Grandma and Grandpa's house now? What was funny about it is, I don't know if you're familiar with Seattle, but there's a big old bay right in the middle of it, and it takes days to drive around it, but only about 45 minutes to take a ferry across. We were right next to the ferry to go to his Grandma and Grandpa's house. I said, "You want to take the ferry?" He said, "No, Dad, I want to drive." So for 2.5 hours, I went through the 4 stages of grief with my son, banging on he beat the snot out of that rental car. Man, it was messed up by the time the trip was over. He's crying, he's yelling, he's punching the dashboard. Then he got on an airplane and came home to live with me. First Sunday he was home, we were all out of the house. He stayed there by himself. And my wife sent me a text message. Why did he just send his sister the message goodbye? I said, "Honey, I don't know, but it sounds bad. I think he's going to hurt himself. You need to get back to the house right now. If I go back there and walk in and find my son on the ground, I'm going to be laying there with him. You need to do something." She got there, waited for the police. They opened the door. Thankfully, he was alive, in the kitchen looking for a knife. Police asked, "Son, do you want to hurt yourself?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." So they Baker acted him. For 72 hours, they took his belt, his shoelaces, everything else. They put him in the back of a police car, and they put him into suicide watch in a psych ward. As I watched that police car pull away, I was sitting in the exact same chair I had been in 18 months earlier when I launched that phone across the room. And I broke down again. My little boy was trying to kill himself, and there was nothing I could do. And my wife came over to me and she looked me right in the eye. And she said 2 words to me. Call David. You see, my wife knows that, ladies and gentlemen, I married way above my pay grade. I tell people all the time I kind of outpunted my coverage when I married this woman. I don't know why I deserved her, but I'm blessed with her. She's amazing. But she knows that there are times when, although she can handle the circumstances, she's probably not the right person for the job. And she just knows that I need that battle buddy. I need that wingman. I need that guy who I can pick up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning and know without a doubt he's going to answer. Fast forward a few years, it's 2012, September. I am about ready to take the platform at Yongsan Army Garrison in Seoul, South Korea. I was hanging out in the Dragon Hill Lodge, if anybody's ever been over that way. Dragon Hill Lodge, big old hotel right in the middle of the post, and it's pretty nice. But if you know anything about being overseas, posted up somewhere outside of continental United States, you've got AFN, right, on TV, and there's usually about 4 channels. None of them you're interested in watching. Every single time I would see the same ad with the Sergeant Major of the Army, because it was this big push against suicide. 2012 was a horrible year, especially in the Army, for suicide. And the Sergeant Major of the Army is on TV. He says, you know what, if you know somebody or if you're thinking of hurting yourself, call this 800 number. Really led me to start studying suicide in the military. And I found out a couple of things. 60% of men and women had considered or even attempted suicide prior to enlistment or commission. 60%. Then I found that 80% were male. Over 90% were under the age of 45. And 59.7% had never served a minute's time downrange. No OIF, no OEF, no contact with the enemy, never been deployed. I'm like, what? How is that possible? Because the news keeps telling me, it's all PTS. It's all combat related. I got 6 out of 10 people that are attempting or taking their own lives, and they've never seen combat. So I went and researched a little bit more, and I discovered that in January of 2014, there was a guy that took his life, and he was a military spouse, took his life at Fort Hood. There was another kid in December of 2014 at Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne, first few weeks on the job, didn't know anybody, brand new post, just out of basic training and school, Christmas party on the edge of a river, got a brand new Camaro. Got into his Class A uniform in his brand new Camaro, went to the battalion-wide or brigade-wide picnic, drove down the boat ramp into a frozen river, killed himself. No friends, new to the post, never served a minute's time in combat. On the top of that bridge are those red phones. If you look up the Florida Highway Patrol, you can actually see the different events where people have jumped off of the Skyway. It's morbid, but if you look at the very bottom, there's one line. It says, call box made. Meaning, did they pick up the phone before they jumped? Every single time it says no. I truly believe that you can flash 800 numbers all over the place, but if you are traveling life alone, a wise man once said that we should pity the person who falls and has no one to help him up. David was there for me. David's been there for me through near bankruptcy on his side, good things, bad things. The dude has always been there to drag me off the field when I'm blown up. It's in your culture, ladies and gentlemen, to have somebody on your 6. If you're a pilot, you never fly without somebody covering your 6. If you're kicking a door, you never go through without somebody on your backside. Never. Yet in life itself, we go through life isolated and alone. And isolation doesn't just lead to suicide. It leads to addiction. It leads to checking out. I'm really good at that. I just shut down. When things go wrong at home, all I do is just turn on 24 straight hours of ESPN because I don't have to talk to anybody. But I'm going to give you a challenge and a charge before you leave here today. We are hyper-connected. Make a date with somebody. Go fishing. Go play golf. Go get a cup of coffee. Just go do something. Because until you spend time with somebody, you won't trust them. And until you trust them, there won't be a relationship. Get out of that box and engage with somebody. Because you don't want to be a statistic, and we should pity the person that falls and has no one to help him up. Thanks.